Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to BB Bullony Basketball. Here with Johnny. How's it going?
Pretty good, Garrett. Another week in the association, so we'll dive into that stuff. But just yesterday, our Bulls completed the biggest comeback of the season, 25 points down in the second quarter to the Pistons of all teams, but they ended up coming back and beating them. Although these days the Pistons only beat good teams, so is this a curse on the Bulls? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to look into this one, but anytime our team can pull off a win like that, it's certainly exciting. So that and much more. How's it going by you?
Yeah, it's going pretty good, and that's an interesting way to look at it for the Bulls. Like, does that mean we are a good team or not? I don't know. But I believe today we are currently going to get, like, the all-star starters from, like, TNT. And the day that you guys are watching this, assuming if the Raptors lose today and the Bulls win tomorrow for us, then they'll be back in the playoff picture, which is something that we'll both be excited about. But we're going to get through our topics. The first one, probably the major one, was Anthony Davis ended up suffering an injury against the Denver Nuggets this past week. Everyone was worried about, is it like a torn Achilles, because then that likely means you're out for the whole season, and probably someone next. And, it has a track record of ruining people's careers. I know Kevin Durant came back well from it. Dominique Wilkins did as well, but it's pretty much just a strained calf. He's going to miss still some time, about 2-3 weeks is what they say, until they reevaluate him. But, the Lakers, they've had some ups, they've had some downs this year, but do you think Anthony Davis's health might be their biggest concern in trying to repeat?
I think it's not even a question. It is their biggest concern for sure. While they have a lot of depth, they have two star players. It's LeBron and AD, so without AD, I think their chances just diminish a whole lot. You got that firepower out in Brooklyn now with James Harden there, so you got a team there to compete with. Who we consider to be the favorites in the East, but even if it's Milwaukee that comes out, even if it's Philadelphia that comes out, you have teams that have more than one star on their roster. And then just in the West itself, whether or not you take Utah seriously is up to you, but I'm sure everybody here takes the Clippers seriously, and playing the Clippers without AD would be a huge hit for the Lakers. For me, just sit him out for a while. 2 to 3 weeks they'll reevaluate him, but I don't see him coming back even at that 2 to 3 week threshold. It's just not worth it for the Lakers at this point. They're going to get a top 3 seed in the West, almost for sure. I don't want to say for sure because Portland or Phoenix could come out and just keep winning games as they have been, but I think the Lakers should feel pretty confident in getting a top 3 seed. But if you want any chance to win, you need AD on this roster. Like I said, there's depth and there's guys now that are going to be able to step up. You have Markieff Morris that's going to get more minutes, Taylor Horton-Tucker, Wes Matthews, Harrell. So they have bodies that can fill in the regular season, but I don't think that without AD, this team is a true championship contender. They might still be a contender, but they're not the favorite without AD, and I think that's the big thing to notice.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue, like, whoever you want, like, saying compare with the Lakers, whether it's, like, Clippers, Bucks, Nets, all these other teams that are, like, up there. But ultimately, if Anthony Davis isn't healthy, the Lakers won't be in that conversation. I know LeBron is great. I know that he's led teams to the finals before, but, when there's teams on the next level like the Warriors were in 2017 and 2018, they really couldn't compete. And I think there's going to be a similar situation if he has to do it alone this year. They can be in that contender status. They can be like in the middle of the pack, but I don't know if they're going to be going all the way with Anthony Davis's health being a concern. And ultimately, I think that is their biggest problem right now, because when Anthony Davis is healthy, I mean, they can beat any team in a playoff series and they could win the championship once again. But I mean, you can even look back at 2019. I know LeBron missed some games, but even like their depth, probably now you could say is, I don't know if it's substantially better than it was then. When they had Brandon Ingram, they had Kuzma playing at his best. They still had Lonzo, so you could even make that argument. And I don't know, it just seems like a concern. But he is supposed to only miss a little less than a month, so that's a good sign for Lakers fans having Anthony Davis before the playoffs, because I don't think they care too much about the regular season.
Yeah, in terms of the depth, I'd say a couple of years ago, that depth was young talent and players that are on the rise and might be able to make a name for themselves in the league, whereas this year's depth is almost all proven players with the exception of THT. You have Schroeder, he's a proven player. Caldwell Pope has been through it now. Kuzma is now matured to a certain level. Harrell's older. Wes Matthews is older. Gasol, Markieff Morris, Alex Caruso, like all these players have been in the league. They know what it takes to win. Many of them were on the championship team last year. So I think that's the big difference is now you have, I don't know if you want to call them veterans, but you have players that have experience and you're not necessarily looking for these players to just explode on the scene, but you know what you're going to get out of them. And that's what a team that has 2 of the top 5, 7 players in the league, that's all you need to surround them with. You need to surround them with players that know what they're doing, know how to win, stuff like that. This isn't a team that's trying to build up from the bottom. They're already up there. They just need to make sure that they have the complementary pieces, which they do. It's just a matter of AD being healthy.
Yeah, they definitely have the experience. They just need the contributors. And I know Anthony Davis fits the bill for both those labels. But we're going to move on to our next topic, which is recently some teams have been sitting some players until they can maybe work out a trade or a buyout. Some of the most notable names are Blake Griffin with the Detroit Pistons, Andre Drummond with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And, you know, for either of those guys, and I'd even throw Kevin Love in here too, because, yeah, his contract's not great, but he really hasn't played hardly at all this year. And I don't know what they're going to do with him. So if it's Blake or Drummond or Kevin Love, do you think any of those guys could be to any use to maybe a contender and help them get over the hump?
Yes, I see Drummond being more of a help than Blake Griffin, but I don't see Drummond putting up A, the numbers he's putting up in Cleveland, or B, being that guy or the second guy. He's nothing more than a very complementary piece. He could be the starting center, he could be the backup center, but he's not going to have a huge role on the team. You got teams like the Raptors interested, the Heat, the Nets are interested. So there's teams that are calling about him, but I'm not sure exactly where he fits in. The Celtics have even called, so that'll be interesting there. I think he's as good as gone. They got Jared Allen in. They tried playing those two together. Clearly didn't work. Jared Allen's the future. Andre Drummond's the past. Let's get him out of town. So that makes complete sense. Blake Griffin, on the other hand, I guess kind of on the same hand, if you will. Older, injured, is not anywhere near what he used to be, but can still, I guess, provide some little glimpses of value. I see him being more of like a matchup type guy. So if he finds his way to a contender like the Clippers or the Lakers, he's going to be somebody that I see like the Markieff Morris of the Lakers last year, right, in the playoffs, where against certain teams, Markieff Morris doesn't get in the game because he doesn't match up well. But then when the Heat went small, Markieff Morris came in and things along those lines. So I think that's what you get out of Blake Griffin. Listen, he's not who he used to be. He can't do what he used to be able to do. So now we have to insert him in for little 3-5 minute spurts, playing against teams when they go small. And so you kind of, as a coach, you just have to finagle your way around it and figure out where Blake Griffin can exploit certain matchups. Kevin Love, I think he stays with Cleveland. I think when LeBron and Kyrie first left, he kind of had that moment of sadness where he almost didn't want to be there anymore. But I think now he started to take on that role of a leader and a mentor and can really help these young Cavs, because the Cavs have a really nice young core. Sexton, Garland, Jared Allen, whatever Isaac Okoro is going to be. Chetty Osman's still somewhat young. So I think Kevin Love can embrace that role of being the leader and the mentor. He's already won a championship, so you can check that off his list. He's an all-star, an all-NBA player. He has all those awards and accolades to his name, so I think it's a lot harder to see Kevin Love on the way out, whereas those other two players seem destined to find their way to a new team.
Yeah, I mean, what I will say is, like, even though I've been on the record multiple times saying, you know, Andre Drummond, a little bit overrated, you know, he's putting up the stats, but I don't know how big his impact is in a positive way. But, I mean, when it comes to these three guys, he probably would be the safest choice and the best choice to help a lot of these contenders. Do you mention, like, the Raptors? I mean, their last game, I believe they played Siakam at the 5. Like, they need help. Like, Aaron Baines has been pretty bad. They let go of Alex Len within, like, 2 weeks this year. So, like, they need help at a center position. Also, the Nets could use him as well, because trading Jared Allen was is going to be a big loss because it puts so much pressure on like DeAndre Jordan and even Jeff Green that play like a stretch five. So I think Andre Drummond, he could help either of those teams. He doesn't have to like be the guy putting up 15 and 15 every game. He just needs to be, a solid rebounder and someone that can like give you a post presence. When it comes to Blake Griffin and Kevin Love, like you mentioned, the injuries, that's always one of the biggest concerns. Kevin Love's contract is, I believe, a little bit worse because it's like an extra year than Blake's. So like you said, I don't know how he'll get out of there, and I don't know really what he can contribute anymore because it seems like the past few years we haven't seen. I think when LeBron left, people thought we were going to get Minnesota Kevin Love back. At least some people did. And we really haven't. It's kind of just been like the same Kevin Love that we saw like all through Cleveland. And that's kind of a disappointment. So I don't know how many teams are going to be looking at him. When it comes to Blake, I mean, it just seems like he's completely like unmotivated in a way. But like this guy was all NBA less than 2 years ago. All NBA third team, which is like just crazy to think about where he is now as opposed to then. But what I will say is, and similar to someone who was on the Detroit Pistons, like Josh Smith, like when he had that big game with the Houston Rockets against the Clippers, like in 2015, I think Blake, if he gets picked up by a team, there's a chance he could have like a moment like that, where he just completely takes over a game. It's like, we'll say he's on the Lakers. I mean, I don't know how that would fit, but everyone's going to be worried about LeBron, Anthony Davis, and say they're down like 10 or 15, but then Blake comes in off the bench and he brings them back because people will forget like Blake Griffin can do certain things like this. So I don't know. That's what I see from those three guys personally.
And just to touch on Blake's skill set, like his whole game has changed since he left LA and started to get injured. Like he's a decent 3-point shooter now. He can take you off the dribble. Like he can just do things that he couldn't do before. He's not throwing down windmills and he's not running the court as much and catching lobs. But he's a completely different player than he used to be. And so I think there's some value to be had there. It just depends on the team that picks him up and finding the right situation for him.
Yeah, I think the fit is going to be like the biggest thing with any of these guys if they end up, switching teams this season. But we're going to move on to some of the middle of the pack teams. Actually, the next two topics are about the 4th and 5th seed in each conference. The first one is about the Eastern Conference side of things. The Indiana Pacers and the Boston Celtics, who have both been struggling. The Pacers started the year, they got off to a hot start. Of course, they had Oladipo then, and they made the trade for LeVert, who hasn't played yet. So maybe that's part of it. But it just seems like lately they've been losing games that they shouldn't have, and they've been in too many close games. Like they went to overtime the other day with the Timberwolves, who are like dead last in the West. When it comes to the Celtics, I mean, they're a 500 team right now, and both these teams, they're 4-6 in their last 10. So what do you make of these two teams who probably should be, up there with the talks of the Nets, the Bucks, the Sixers, but they're both struggling?
Yes, I think the Pacers are a step below the Celtics to begin with, and before the season started, I actually had the Pacers on the outside looking in terms of the playoff picture, but I certainly didn't envision it going this way. I didn't envision TJ Warren missing a bunch of time, Jeremy Lamb missing a bunch of time, Oladipo getting traded, Karis LeVert being injured, or having medical issues. So I'm not going to act like I predicted this to happen. But then on the other side of things, Sabonis is having a career year. Malcolm Brogdon is as steady as ever. Miles Turner is leading the league in blocks. So this team still has the pieces to at least be competitive in the East and team a 4th or 6th seed, which they very well may still end up acquiring or being the 4th or 6th seed at the end of the season. But right now they're just struggling mightily, and I'm not sure exactly what to pin it on because, like I said, Sabonis having that career year, Brogdon has a case to be an all-star, even though we almost know for sure he's going to get snubbed, if you want to call it snubbed. Miles Turner leading the league in blocks. McDermott's shooting the ball well. You have the Holiday brothers that are still solid. So, like I said, there's pieces. It's just they can't put the puzzle together. Whereas the Celtics at the beginning of the year, I had them as at least a fringe championship contender, and right now they look nothing like that. Danny Ainge said we're not even close to being a championship contender. The Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum duo has looked very good. But Kemba Walker is where I pinpoint my struggles to. This team, if they wanted any chance to compete for a championship, they need Kemba Walker to really step up, and he just hasn't proven to do that. There's absolutely zero wing depth on this team. Peyton Pritchard's looked good, but he's not going to be your starting point guard if you're a championship contender, at least this season. Jeff Teague hasn't been able to carry on his good play from early on in the season, and Tristan Thompson has just looked lost in Boston the whole season. So there's a lot of things that are chaotic and going on with Boston. Whether or not Danny Ainge pulls the plug and makes a splash in the trade market, that I don't know. But they're not one piece away from competing. They're multiple pieces away.
Yeah, I won't touch too much on the Pacers because I think most people have lower expectations for them than Boston. But what I will say is I think they should still be in that conversation. If you look at, like, the Pacers, they have a lot of wing depth. When they're healthy, they have arguably one of the top 2, top 3 starting lineups all around in the Eastern Conference. But it just doesn't make sense because, they were playing so well. And it almost seemed like they didn't really have consistency in their lineup at the start of the year either. Like, that's when Warren was playing. Then he got hurt. Then they had Oladipo playing, like, almost every other game. Then they traded him. And then they were starting, like, I believe, Justin Holiday some games and then Aaron Holiday some games. So it really didn't make sense, but they were still, like, one of the top 2, top 3 in the East. Now they've lost 6 of their last 10, and they even got Jeremy Lamb back, which is a bit confusing. Sabonis has had some games where he struggled recently. I know the other night he put up a crazy stat line against Minnesota, but he's had some games where he's been struggling. But I think they should be right in the conversation with the Celtics, who, in my opinion, Boston, like, they don't have depth. Marcus Smart's value is showing a lot right now. Not only Marcus Smart, I think it's also Gordon Hayward, who they lost in the summer. And I've been saying this all along. Like, they just don't have those pieces. And Kemba Walker, who came back from injury, he hasn't looked like Kemba Walker at all. And another thing you have to look at is Brad Stevens. I feel like Brad Stevens doesn't get enough blame in the piece of the pie. I mean, this is his 8th season there, and they have nothing to show for it. They've had some decent runs where they made the conference finals once when they played, LeBron and the Cavs. But, like, other years, like with Kyrie and Gordon Hayward, and they underachieve. I would say they underachieved last year when they lost to the Heat. So, I mean, there's, like, a lot of things that this team has that they need to fix. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum have been great. Kemba, when he's healthy, is great. Outside of that, I don't know. It's just like they have a lot of stuff to fix.
I'd say I want to be careful with the way I say it, but you kind of just at the end, you said that you'd say Boston underachieved last year in the playoffs. I'll say they didn't if you would have told Boston at the beginning of the year that they would have made the conference finals and lost in 6 games, I think it was, I'm not sure I would have said that's an underachievement. If you told me they would have lost in 6 games to Miami Heat, then I would have said, yes, that's an underachievement. So I think it's a twofold discussion that we have to be careful with how we say it, because I think going into the season, not many people had Boston as the best team in the East. So for them to be competitive in the conference finals, I'd call that a good year. Considering who they were playing, I think that's a series they very well should have won, and so in that case, then yes, I call it an underachievement. But you did also mention Marcus Smart being out. That's a huge loss for this team. He does so much of the dirty work. He is a very primary distributor of the basketball. He takes the playmaking duties off the hands of Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, allows them to really go out and score the ball. Gritty defender, so you lose a lot there as well. And everybody throws his name around in trade talks. Like, anytime there's a big name, or anytime there's a decent name on the trade block, it's, Marcus Smart's the first name thrown in, Marcus Smart's the first name thrown in. I'd be careful if I was Boston just throwing Marcus Smart into a deal. Now, if it's for James Harden, go for it. When you're talking about upper echelon players, top 5, top 10 players in the league, yeah, if it's going to take Marcus Smart, go ahead and do it. But if we're talking about a middle-of-the-ground player that might barely sway it one way or the other, I'm not tossing Marcus Smart into that bucket because I know how valuable he is to the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, I will say it was at least a disappointing end to the season for the Celtics last year, because you could even look at it like the TrailBlazers in 2019. Like, nobody picked them to beat the Thunder when they were missing Yusuf Nurkic. No one picked them over Denver. But then they played the Warriors, who were missing Durant. And I think even though the Warriors were favorited, some people would say the Blazers were more than capable of winning that series. And then the way they lost was just embarrassing. The Celtics last year were more than capable of beating the Heat, the Heat, they have their own struggles right now this season, probably even more so than Boston. So I think that they should have been able to meet that expectation, get to the finals at the very least. But we're going to move on to the other side of things, the Western Conference. The Portland TrailBlazers and the Phoenix Suns, they have been rising while these Eastern Conference teams have been struggling. They're both 8-2 in their last 10. As for Phoenix, they got wins against like the Bucks, the 76ers, Dallas, and then as for Portland, they beat Dallas, they beat the 76ers as well. Seems like they've had similar schedules. But the point is, they've both been playing really well, and I think that they're starting to, make some noise in the Western Conference. It seems like all year it's been like a 3-team race. The LA teams and the Utah Jazz have been above everybody. But these two teams are trying to say, don't count us out. What have you made of the way the Suns have been gelling together, with the addition of Chris Paul and all these other new pieces like Jay Crowder, and also the Blazers, the way they've been playing with their injuries to CJ McCollum and Yusuf Nurkic?
Yeah, so I want to start with the Blazers here. A week ago, everybody was clamoring, why isn't Steph in the MVP conversation? Why isn't Steph in the MVP conversation? Look at what he's doing with this Warriors team. Look at it. I'm saying a week later, why is Damian Lillard not in the MVP conversation? And where do you have him if he's in the MVP conversation? He's a top 5 MVP candidate for me right now, for sure. The Blazers are 5th in the West right now. They're on a league-high 5 or 6 game win streak as we record this. They're missing their 2 best players. And he's playing with nobody around him. The starting lineup outside of him right now is Gary Trent. He's a good shooter, but he's not very proven in the league. Derek Jones Jr. Not a great shooter. He's a good defender, but hadn't done much in Miami. Robert Covington, who's having one of the worst years of his career, still a valuable defender, but not much more outside of that. And Enes Kanter, who could score and rebound, but can't play defense for the life of him. And off the bench, it's Nasir Little, Anthony Simons, Rodney Hood, and Carmelo Anthony. This is the team that Damian Lillard is carrying. Most clutch points in the league this year. Hitting big-time shots. He won that game against the Thunder that they probably should have won very easily, being up 25 in the middle of the game, but whatever. He still came out in the fourth quarter and won that game for them. And just last night, he beat the Pelicans by himself, basically, in that fourth quarter. He scored or assisted on the last, I don't know the number of points, but for the last 7.5 minutes in the game, every single point that the Blazers scored was either a Dame assist or a Dame point himself. So he's taking this team to new levels, and we can talk about what he does in the regular season all the time, but at a certain point, I hope we can get Dame back to the conference finals because he's just incredible to watch. Phoenix, on the other hand, I'm going to keep it short and simple. Any team that Chris Paul comes to, that team just gets better. It's that easy. Between the New Orleans teams, between him on the Clippers, between him on the Rockets, him on the Thunder, and now him on the Suns. Taking pressure off Devin Booker, who's scoring the ball at a high rate. Ayton's still a double-double machine down low. Mikal Bridges, one of the most improved players in the league that nobody's talking about. Great 3-and-D defender. Jay Crowder brings that same thing that Bridges brings, but has more experience. Cam Johnson's a knockdown shooter. Not sure that they're a contender in the West, but they're in that second tier to me. And Chris Paul's the reason they are.
Yeah, when it comes to the Blazers, even the one up you on the Dame about top 5 in MVP, I would argue he's top 3 in MVP. I had him top 5. I think it was 2 weeks ago when we made our list or something like that. But ever since then, he's played just better and better, especially down the stretch of games. Like you said, he's had the most clutch points in the league, and I think that ever since that 2019 run, I feel like Dame and also CJ have helped change the culture in Portland. I think now we look at them as a more serious team than we did any time before that. It's just oh, here's the Blazers, lost to the Pelicans, lost to the Warriors in the first round, but now it's yeah, even if they lose in the first or second round, it's they're still a team you don't want to play in the playoffs. I think that's the respect that they've gained from the league. even with their injuries, and you might say like, oh, their win percentage of opponents in this win streak wasn't that great, but it doesn't really represent how good these teams are. Like the Mavericks, they're like a below 500 team right now, but everyone knows that they're still a really good team. And if they were in the East, they'd probably be a top 5, top 6 seed right now. You could look at the Pelicans, who could arguably be a playoff team in the Eastern Conference as well. They have Zion, they have Ingram, Lonzo. So, like, some of these teams that they've been playing have been pretty insane, regardless, and like whoever they've been facing. And I think Dame deserves a lot of credit for that. I think Terry Stotts even deserves some credit for that because he gets a lot of hate from the Blazers fans. But the fact that like he's still the coach that's drawing up the game plans and they're able to get over the hump in all these games, he deserves a little bit of credit for that at the very least. As for the Phoenix Suns, like you said, any team that gets Chris Paul is automatically going to be a serious threat. And I would say that they are a contender. I would say both these teams are legit contenders because there's a chance that in a 7-game series, I think that they are both capable of getting at least 2 games against any of these teams above them. I mean, the Jazz, who you also got to think, the Jazz are the 1 seed, so they'll likely play, if everything's shaped out the way it is right now, they'll probably play the Jazz in the second round. I think that both these teams are capable of beating them. Not that they will, but I think they can. And if they get to the conference finals, you never know what can happen when you're that far into the playoffs. So, I don't know. I think, and also the fact with Mikal Bridges, he's been playing, like you said, a most improved candidate. I'd probably say he's the favorite, if not at least top 3 in winning it this year. So, I mean, both these teams are legit, and you can't sleep on either of them.
For me, I guess the conversation we're having right now is
a disparity as to how we define contender. And I think we see it in the NBA a lot. Like, we anoint players to be stars or superstars, but we don't have that fine line drawn. Like, I don't know, I say maybe there's 6 or 7 superstars in the league. Some people say there's 12. Some people say there's 15. Same thing with contenders for me. If I woke up in 4 months at the end of the finals or 5 months and the finals are over, and you told me that Portland won the NBA Finals, I'm going to be surprised. If I wake up in 5 months and you told me that Phoenix won the NBA Finals, I'm going to be surprised. Now, if I wake up and you tell me it's the Lakers or the Clippers, I'm not going to be shocked out of my mind, and so for me, that's why I call them a contender. I just don't see it with Phoenix or Portland. They're good stories. They could win their first round matchup because they're probably going to play each other, so one of them's going to win it. And there's a possibility they could shock somebody in the second round. For them to then do it another 2 rounds after that, I see it very unlikely.
See, that's where I disagree because I feel like, with Phoenix and Portland, I think that they're capable of beating these teams that are ranked above them. So if they did beat them in a series, yeah, it's not the likely situation. Everyone's going to pick the Clippers or the Lakers or someone like over them in a series. But if they did beat them, I mean, it would be kind of crazy because it would still like shell shock the world for the most part. But I think that that's possible doing it now. Not to like diss on some of these other teams like the Spurs, who are the 6th seed. I don't see the Spurs doing that, so I wouldn't consider them a contender at all. They've been great this year, but I'm pretty sure we can all agree they're not winning the championship. But I don't know. I think I'm looking at more like series by series, and if they were to beat a team like one of the LA teams, I mean, the path to the finals after that would probably not be too bad, considering those 2 LA teams would have to face off the way things are going right now. I think they could do it.
Yeah, I mean,
first round matchup, like I said, one of them's going to win. They beat Utah. Okay, some people think Utah's the 2014-2015 Atlanta Hawks regular season fluke. Now you got to beat one of the LA teams. Big shocker. Get to the finals, you got to beat the Nets, you got to beat the Sixers. Big shocker again. Like, I just don't see it as something that's very likely. That's at least likely to an extent that I could believe it, I guess. So sure, there's a 1-2% chance that they win the finals. But like when I'm talking about contenders, I'm talking about teams that have maybe 8 to 25% chance to win the finals or whatever that number is. And so I guess that's where I draw my line. And so we could see it in a similar breath, but it all just depends on where that line's drawn on the term contender.
Yeah, I just think, I don't know. I think it's like sometimes the path to like in the playoffs. Like the way it's shaped out right now, there's a chance Denver or Dallas could end up playing one of the, or both of the LA teams in the first round. So I think both those teams are capable of beating that team. And if that's the case, maybe if you go along like through it, and then you see like in the second round, oh, one of the LA teams or like the Utah Jazz, or even in the East, like the Nets, the Bucks, or something like that, like they're out. Then maybe one of these other teams like the Pacers or the Raptors or some of these teams that aren't like getting too much, light this season, like then their window opens up and it becomes like more realistic. Like, oh yeah, they can maybe beat Boston or they could beat Philly if an opportunity presented itself.
Yeah, so I guess on the surface, if you take all that, if you don't take any of that into account, then it's a lot easier for us to determine that. But once you start to put things into place and see, okay, this is going to be a most likely second round matchup, two best teams that most people think are going to match up in the second round, you knock one out, and then it's a lot easier to start throwing that term around differently and anoint teams contenders. But if you look at it from a holistic view, where you don't take all that into account, then you're going to have different views. And so I think a lot of it also is just how we view it, whether or not we're taking things into context or we're just saying contender without understanding where teams are in the conference.
Yeah, it does depend. And, they would only play one of the two LA teams in their route, like Portland or Phoenix, if everything went as it is right now. So that would make it a lot easier than having to play, like, whoever. Like, if they played each other and then the Clippers and then the Lakers and then, like, the Nets or Bucks or something like that, then it would be, like, a completely hard path. But I don't know. I think we're going to move on to our daily picks now, starting with February 19th. We have the Suns and Pelicans. Who you got here?
Yeah, I'm going to take the contender. I'm going to take the Phoenix Suns. I like Phoenix here. New Orleans is playing... Listen, Zion's playing very good basketball right now. Brandon Ingram is starting to slack a bit, but I just think that they have zero defense, and Phoenix is going to be too much to handle.
Yeah, I got the contender as well. No, I'm just kidding. I'm taking the Phoenix Suns. On the 20th, we got a finals rematch of the Heat Lakers. Who you got here?
Yeah, the Heat have been scuffling a lot lately, but I think this is the spot that they shock people and win. No AD, so different matchup. I just think Miami needs to win a game no matter who that team is, and it looks like it's going to be the Lakers, so I'm going to take Miami.
I got the Heat, too. I think all the eyes are going to be on them. It's a nationally televised game. No Anthony Davis. Perfect chance for them to steal a game. On the 21st, we have the Nets-Clippers, another pretty good game. Who you got here?
I like the Nets here. And listen, this is just a guess with who's going to be in and out. We haven't seen Paul George or Kawhi Leonard in the last couple of games. Batum even sat. Beverly sat some games. In terms of the Nets, we haven't seen Irving. We haven't seen KD. As we record tonight, the Nets play the Lakers. KD's missing that game, but Kyrie's going to be in. So I'm confident that we're going to see at least two of the three in terms of the Brooklyn Big Three. Not sure that we're going to see either of the two guys on the Clippers. That is Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, so I'm going to go with the Clippers.
Wait, you're taking the Clippers or the Nets?
Oh, the Nets. I am completely sorry. Thank you for correcting me.
I was like, wait a second. That confused me then. Actually, regardless, though, I'm going to take the Clippers because we've seen the Nets. They've lost games to the Cavs and the Wizards when they had everybody, or at least two of their big three. And, the Clippers, I think they're going to want revenge because they lost the last one. Whether or not Kawhi and Paul George play, I think someone's going to show out and they're going to get the win. That's just what I think. But on the 22nd, we had the two teams that we just spent a long time talking about, the Blazers and the Suns. Who's winning this?
Yeah, I am a Blazers guy here. I don't know. There's only so much analysis I can get, right? We don't know who's in, we don't know who's out. But I just like the outlook of the Blazers. Between the way they're shooting the ball, not only that, you have the closer in Damian Lillard, but the two biggest threats on the Suns, CP3 and Devin Booker, we can match those guys up with Covington and Derrick Jones Jr., so I like that there, and that leads me to the Blazers.
Yeah, I think Dame's going to have a huge game. That rhymed. But I think that he's going to be able to get him over the hump. It's going to be a close one. And I mean, he's probably the best player in this matchup here and the most clutch based on what we've seen this season. So I'm going to take the Blazers as well. As for the 23rd, we have the Pistons, Magic. A little bit of a battle for the first pick, maybe. But who you got here?
Yeah, this is I'm going dumpster diving here.
I'm going to go with Orlando just because Detroit only beats good teams and Orlando's not a good team. So by that, I'm going to go Orlando.
Yeah, I got Orlando as well. I don't think I've picked them at all this year, or at least not since like Fultz tore his ACL. But I'm going to go with the Magic. On the 24th, we have the Lakers and the Jazz, who are currently top 2 in the West. Who's taking this one?
I'm going to go with Utah here. Listen, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And Utah's won 20 of 21 as of today. Might be 21 of 22, I'm not sure. They beat the Clippers shorthanded. The Clippers were shorthanded. The Lakers are going to be shorthanded. Mike Conley, not sure when he's going to be back, but the way Utah's playing right now, I'm not going to fade them. And so I'm just going to go with Utah.
Yeah, I got the Jazz as well. Like, the Utah has like a complete identity, I feel like, this year. Like, Mike Conley, he's playing how we expected him to last year. Bogdanovich, he's starting to get his groove back, being like the guy on the perimeter that you can kick for an open shot. Gobert, the defensive specialist, and Donovan Mitchell, the star. I think the Utah will take this one. And then they close out things on the 25th. We have the Mavericks and the 76ers. Luka Doncic, Joel Embiid. What do you got here?
I'm going to go with the Mavericks, but I'm not super comfortable in doing so just because who's going to guard Joel Embiid, I guess, is the big question, and I'm not quite sure I know that answer. But I like Luka Magic here.
I think this is another statement game for a potential MVP season for Joel Embiid. So I think he's going to go off, and I'm going to predict at least 36 points and at least 11 rebounds. I think he's going to have a pretty decent game.
I'll match you with the 40-point triple-double from Luka.
It might happen, but he did drop a 44 bomb the other day and did take the L, so we'll see.
I was going to say, it could quite possibly be a 40-point triple-double in a loss as well.
Yeah, it seems like Luka and Jokic have had like the most games this year where it's like they're doing so much like on the stat sheet, but they just can't get the win as a result.
Yeah, the teams haven't done enough around them to catapult these enormous stat lines into actual meaningful W's in the win-loss column, and it's clearly hurting both teams.
Yeah, but we'll see. I mean, there's a lot of time left in the regular season. They could still, work their way up. But hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Any final thoughts?
Nothing, no. I mean, I guess the one thing I will say, all-star starters are announced tonight, Thursday the 18th, not the 28th. So that's exciting, as always. And once we know that, we'll be able to dive into that.
Yeah, we had to work through some camera problems in the middle of the show. Hopefully it wasn't too crazy, but hopefully by the day this is released, at the end of that day, the Bulls will be back in the playoff picture since who knows how long. But thank you guys for watching, and we're out. Peace.